Welcome to the November 14th governing body meeting. I call this meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Councilman Kell, who will provide the invocation, stand as you are able and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. Tonight we will have Father Matthew Nagel. He's currently the pastor at Mater Dei Catholic Parish, which includes both Holy Name and Assumption. He's been a pastor at Mater Dei since July 1st, 2023. From 2019 until 2023, he served as the director and chaplain of the Diddy Catholic Campus Center at Emporia State University, as well as the pastor of St. Mary's Parish in Hartford, Kansas. From 2015 until July 2015 to June of 2019, he was the patriarchal vicar associate pastor at St. Michael's the Archangel in Leawood, as well as the chaplain at St. Thomas Aquinas High School and volunteer chaplain at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. Father Nagel is originally from Overland Park, Kansas, graduate of 2007, graduate of University of Kansas, and a graduate from Kenrick Glennon Seminary School in St. Louis in 2015. Go ahead, Olive.
Welcome, Father. Yes,
sir.
At the podium.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
We pray to you, Almighty and eternal God, who sent your only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, the true light, revealing your glory to all the nations, and beg you to send down upon this assembly your Holy Spirit. Grant that the light of your divine wisdom may shine forth in all proceedings here tonight, so that our council may preserve peace, justice, and liberty in our city. We pray to you, O Lord, appealing to your unbounded mercy and recommending to your providential care all our fellow citizens throughout the city of Topeka. We ask for your protection upon our city, upon our civil servants, on our emergency personnel, police, fire, and medical personnel. We ask you to bless all veterans and protect servicemen and women abroad and at home. We pray to you, O Creator ineffable, who in your tremendous goodness created us in your image and likeness. Grant us the courage to defend all human life, without which no other rights are secure. We pray to you, O God of comfort and healing, and we entrust to your care all who are struggling with mental illness, those who are lonely and isolated. We beg you to send upon them your consolation and inspire all people of goodwill to know that they are their brother's keeper. Finally, especially in this month of November, we entrust to you, O Lord of mercy, all the souls of the faithful departed. May eternal light shine upon them, and may they rest in peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Father Nagel.
Okay, Madam Clerk, if you'll call the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Council members Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Kale.
Here.
Nager. Jobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Hofer. All right, we have 8 present with council members Nager and Hofer absent.
Okay. Next on the agenda is a proclamation to recognize National Native American Heritage Month. I have a proclamation to read, and there are some people in the audience that, if they'd like to, they can join me here at the mic. Lisa Baker, Yale Taylor, and Conrad Pumpkinseed. Am I correct?
Sitting there staring at you. I'm like, how do I know him?
Mayor.
Good. You can have Reagan back.
Welcome. Welcome. This is an important proclamation. For a long time, I've tried to remind people as much as I can about whose land we are on in Shawnee County. And it's important for us to recognize at every opportunity the Native Americans who were so important to the development of this country and continue to be. So a proclamation, whereas in 1990, President George H.W. Bush dedicated the month of November as National American Indian Heritage Month. And whereas Native Americans, as descendants of the original indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States, Americans of all ages recognize the many outstanding achievements of this country's original inhabitants and their descendants. And as the first Americans, Native Americans have helped shape our nation at every point since before its founding, including being the inspiration for the ideals of self-governance. And whereas during National Native American Heritage Month, we celebrate the rich tapestry of indigenous peoples and honor their sacrifices, which we recognize and inextricably woven into the history of this country. And whereas Native Americans continue to add to all aspects of our society through their generosity of culture and the continued practice of teaching economic, environmental, and cultural sustainability. And whereas we honor and celebrate the perseverance, the fascinating history, time-honored traditions, rich diversity and excellence of Native Americans, from the first peoples of this place to those, the nation who now call the city of Topeka, Kansas, their home. Now, therefore, I, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of the city of Topeka, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2023 as National Native American Heritage Month. This month, I encourage everyone in our city to learn more about the people who first called this nation home, in the spirit of growth, healing, and the hope for a better future. In witness whereof, I, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of the city of Topeka, Kansas, do hereby affix my official signature and the official seal of the city of Topeka, Kansas, on this 14th day of November, 2023. Lisa? You're welcome if you wish to make some comments.
I am very honored to accept this on behalf of all of the tribal citizens of many nations who reside in Topeka and make this their home. And I have two of them behind me. I'm going to ask them to thank you in their language too, but in my language, Wado.
Wopila Tonka.
Yakoki.
I also put in a plug for Lisa Baker's new 785 location in Noto. If you get a chance to get up there, take a look at some of the art that she has there. It's really inspiring to see some of the native art that's there. So just wanted to put that out there for people when they get a chance to visit the area. We'll move on now, Madam Clerk, to agenda item number 3.
3 is our appointments. Items A, B, and D are board appointments recommending the appointment of Jennifer Hannon, Katie Nielsen, and Willie Brooks to the Topeka Planning Commission for a term ending November 14, 2026. And C is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Cassandra Taylor to the Board of Building and Fire Appeals for a term ending December 31, 2025.
Okay, you've heard the appointments as announced. Is there a motion to consider?
Motion to approve?
Okay, motion to approve by Councilman Emerson, seconded by Councilwoman Hiller. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
We have 7 yes, motion carries.
Okay, motion being carried. We'll move on now to agenda item number 4, presentations. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and governing body. I want
Oh,
to
I'm sorry. I did skip something. For those people who've just been approved by the governing body for the board appointments, if you are here, please stand so we can give you some recognition for accepting the appointment. Okay, now, Mr. City Manager.
Mayor and governing body, what I want to talk about tonight, what the city attorney wants to talk about tonight, is to give you an update on our camping ordinance. First thing I want to do is give you a little bit of history. As you know, in September, you amended the current camping ordinance to add new restricted areas and set an effective date of enforcement as of November 17, 2023, which is 2 days away. As many of you know, some of you have been involved in those discussions. I think all of you are aware that since that time, city staff in several different departments have worked diligently, and they've spent countless hours researching and evaluating how to best implement those changes. What I'm going to do is request of you tonight to delay that enforcement date of no camping in the newly included areas due to general factors, several factors. Timing with the winter weather, resources. We have spent a lot of city money on cleanups, on other homeless issues, and we need some flexibility as we go towards the end of the year. And the ongoing homeless initiative, which is probably more important at this point, process that is well underway with the innovation track. So I'm going to give you a date that I'm going to suggest, but I want you to know a few things first. We are enforcing. We haven't stopped enforcement. We will continue enforcement of the currently existing no camping areas. In fact, I think Chief Wheelis would tell you that we will be stepping up that enforcement. He and his team have talked about the priorities for enforcement, and they focus their efforts on areas where we tend to receive complaints, including proximity to infrastructure, and we mean bridges, bus shelters, buildings, water towers, etc. If it's infrastructure, the chief will be there and his department will be there enforcing any complaints we have. And in our business corridors, like downtown and NoDo. Now, I want the public to understand, I want the council to understand, enforcement is not exclusive to those areas. If they get a call from a neighborhood where there's a concern, they will be there for enforcement. But this is the priority, and it doesn't mean that that's the only areas where enforcement take place, but it's the areas where we're going to keep the closest look on things at. Stepped up in enforcement of currently prohibited no camping areas will happen immediately. And I would tell you, I found out today that you've had a no camping ordinance on the books for 5 years, and there's been enforcement of that through those 5 years. So this is not new. When we're enforcing those existing no camping areas, the city does everything they can to prioritize connecting those who are unsheltered with resources and partners who provide housing assistance and other services. I know from the people, the unit in a TPD that does that, unit in our development department that does that, they do it with compassion and grace, and they do everything they can to get the people that we're moving to some type of services, and so that they have somebody to talk to that helps get them in a better place. I'm asking your support in delaying the implementation, and we're not going to just stop. I would rather view it as a phased implementation, but with the new restricted areas for camping, allow us to step up our efforts of the existing no camping zones and to reevaluate by January 31st, 2024. I would ask that you support me in making that change to how we're doing things. And I would invite any feedback or comments you might have.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Councilman Duncan.
I guess this is for the attorney. I mean, we passed an ordinance.
Yes.
What authority does staff have? This is not an action item. I don't understand what authority staff has to simply not implement an ordinance without us taking an affirmative action doing that. I have a concern with that procedurally.
So all laws are discretionarily enforced by their government. Obviously, the role of staff is to implement a governing body's desires as there is a date. While you could take a formal vote and change the date, it is also legally acceptable to say, yes, city manager, delay an implementation. There are other ordinances that you have passed that have not yet been in place. I think parking's on here today. And so there are some of those that happen periodically. Obviously, you could take a vote, but it is also legally allowed to discretionarily decide that you will not enforce for a certain period of time.
Okay, so two things from that. The first is we do have things we've passed that aren't being enforced, and I have an issue with that. I think as we all should. That's the direction we give our staff to do it. The reason I asked that question is because of this one. My concern with this has been one of the reasons we put this in place, knowing it was going to have some hiccups and things we needed to work through. And I am very sympathetic and actually agree with some of the reasons we may need to delay it. But I want to keep in place some mechanism, because a primary reason we did this was safety concerns along our trails. And without this in place, our officers have no authority to even tell someone, you got to move 10 feet back. I'm not asking you to go 500 like we passed, but you're right on the trail. I got to get you 10 feet back from that trail. And so I guess that's my question. If this is still on the books, but we're kind of working through, then they have that authority. And if we actively repeal it temporarily, they have no authority to do that, right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to work through, to be honest, in my brain here.
Our TPD officers would not have authority to say you cannot camp on the trails, although even under the ordinance, if it was in place tomorrow, you still have to give 24 hours notice for someone to move. You can't instantaneously move anyone off the trails. That being said, the trail itself, the land off it is various private property, but the trail itself is owned by the county, who has prohibited camping on the trail itself. And so the sheriff's department can do active patrols, and I believe they are, to remove people from the trail. And actually, as the property owner, if the county says no one is allowed to be on the trails, TPD could, if they could prove a trespassing case, actually remove someone because you'd be trespassing in an area not allowed by the property owner.
Right, but the trail itself is the actual trail. So we're going to get too literal here, but the concrete itself.
Correct.
Anything off that concrete is what we were trying to address with this, to give us some flexibility to address that if it was a concern in an area.
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to put out there, that's my only temporary concern with this, is that we may not be using that mechanism.
I guess I should clarify one thing legally. The ordinance itself goes into effect, and how you enforce it, you can choose to discretionarily delay enforcement. If you were having a lot of issues on the trail, you could say, we're having a lot of issues and we're not delaying the trail piece until January, and you could do it immediately if you needed to, because it is a legal ordinance in effect the 17th.
I got you. But there's really no action for us being asked to take at this point anyway.
Correct.
It's just sort of informing us and the public that this is sort of a 90-day hold, as it were. Okay, thank you.
City Manager and Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager. A couple of things. One, I just want to clarify, because I'm going to widen this dialogue a little bit more. Focus on proximity to infrastructure. I was under the impression that that would also include the number of abandoned homes that we have, empty residences that we have as part of the infrastructure component. And I'm asking that first, but let me say this. Several weeks ago, the Director of Code Enforcement and I did a thorough drive-through District 2. And I mean, that's my district, so I stayed within that realm. And in preparation for what we needed to do, because the first thing I'm thinking as we come into the winter or any time is fire. And we were just told by the Red Cross yesterday at the Oakland NIA meeting is that Topeka has the second highest amount of fires in the state. That is only next to, the first highest is Wichita. And she also stated, this was the director of the Red Cross, that many of these in both cities are arson related. So we know that we have an issue. So I just want to make sure from the discussions that I have had with you all that those structures, as far as residential locations that need to be boarded up still or are boarded up now, are going to be part of that enforcement.
Yes.
Yes, and not to speak for John Chardine's behalf, but it's been really nice being in the Holiday Building because we're right next to code. So we daily are working together on legal issues to help improve that because, as Chief Phillips would tell you, this time of year is the worst for fires, and he would really like to not have as many.
Right. So the other part of that is that when we had talked about this, and I'm talking about my discussions, not as the whole governing body, is that I believe it's wise at this point. I told Oakland NIA yesterday, I told folks on social media, you need to watch this meeting tonight because you're not going to be happy about it, but I support it in the way that I think it's very, very important for the new council to be seated before we really dig in on this. I know that the passing happened in such a whirlwind fashion. It was just kind of, hold on, here it comes, and it's, co-sponsor and it's passed. But we knew that there was much logistical work to be done. After having had some insight into what some of these maps are looking like, I totally give it to the staff for everything that they have done. But what it ended up raising is many concerns, and folks that I've talked to in community too, about the possible issue in itself of policing locations that will be possibly slated in the future for camping to take place on city property, not wanting to have a situation like they're having in Lawrence. And so that whole tension of that dialogue needs to take place, to me, in a very open fashion, in a transparent fashion, to where we can have folks come up and speak to it as well. There is one other thing that I want to say about this. As we talk about the homeless and the unsheltered and the encampments, I'm still going to be very firm in my take on there is a particular segment of population that I'm not going to classify as homeless, as far as in with all the rest that are trying so hard to lift themselves up and out of the situations of the desperation that they are in. There is a few in this community, and I just had almost a 2-hour meeting with Chief yesterday and business owners in Topeka that none of you have heard from yet, but I'm going to forward the governing body the email on issues that are happening across the city with this particular business owners and the consummate amount of violence and increased aggression that they are dealing with what they know to be a segment of unsheltered population. The majority of this 2-hour conversation that took place was their abject frustration, anger, not knowing what to do, not knowing how they can be part of the solution, because they also get the sense that this very small segment of the population does not want help. And so I think that that's something that we cannot lose sight of. For the majority, we need to work hard to get the housing, to get the mental health, to get the addiction health, all of this. But when you see business owners, and I'm not talking multi-million-dollar business owners, I'm talking your average Joe business owners that have been seeing increasing violence in their businesses, and they want to know how the city can help and how they can help when they are increasing their security systems by several $1,000s, and that has happened a number of times with small North Topeka businesses that I'm dealing with, then we have to be able to respond to them as well, because we don't want to lose these small businesses that are homegrown. The other thing I want to state that I heard from these people, from these folks, that they have a lot of interest out of town as well, a lot of family and friends out of town, is their concern that Topeka is getting worse. And we don't want that. So the forward conversations that we have to take the nuance into consideration rather than looking at this as a black and white, and we have to look at new possibilities, new ideas, because up until this point, what we've done has not been working. Thank you.
Councilman Peeler.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got two issues. First, though, I want to thank the staff. I know that people have been working their tails off trying to look at solutions, look at maps, and the fellow nonprofits that are working as well. I've got questions about this. I appreciate the comments of my colleagues so far. I guess I've got two questions. Maybe they would both start with you. One would be, there's conversation in what you shared about dealing with no camping zones, but not about dealing with all homeless camps and making sure that everyone, wherever they are, is following our ordinances. Can you address that?
Well, I believe we are already, I believe we are already enforcing the ordinance. I know we've done it on several camps that we have that are not in compliance, and I don't expect it to be any different as we go forward.
I think that's really important to the people who are in the camps, but also to the public. The concern about the trash, the human waste, the things being out of control. So I hope that that's an integral part of what you're expecting going forward.
Well, if I may, governing body and mayor, I am not suggesting that we repeal anything. I'm not suggesting that we not enforce anything. In fact, what we have here is a ramping up of the enforcement, and that needs to happen.
Thank you. The second question I had was that, and I appreciate the one-on-ones that you provided for those of us who came in to visit about it, and I did that this morning. So just had a chance to kind of reflect on that afterward. One of the things that's happening parallel to this discussion is, and I'm not going to get the name of it right, but the homeless initiative. What's
the Homeless Innovation.
Homeless Innovation Group has in fact started meeting, and my understanding is people are working very hard, that they've got assignments to do research, build bases, and that per the direction of this group, we've asked them to look at the entire situation of homelessness and how we can address that in Topeka. And with that, I think they're about 2 months in, and it was an 8 or 9 month engagement, if I'm right, which means it's gonna take them till mid-year to come up with their recommendations. Again, they're well on the way as I understand it. My question would be then, if we're not gonna make a firm implementation decision right now, would it be better for us to say that we're gonna let it go under your terms until that group is finished, so that the indecision on the part of the city council is not hanging them up from wondering what we're gonna do and what problem they're really trying to solve? Because I'm just not sure we're gonna be in the middle of winter. If we're talking about the end of January, brand new council, I'm not sure that that's a good date if we're planning to extend. You know, maybe at least through the winter, but some sort of consistency, which has troubled me. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. You know, I don't think that the January date that the city manager is giving is set in stone. I certainly have deep trepidation about waiting until the consultants committees are done. I think that that is going a little bit too far. I think that there has always been the understanding, as being one of the auxiliary members, there's always been the understanding that there are two tracks running. That would be the consultant path, and that would be this governing bodies path. I don't think that, you know, when Councilman Dobler, you know, brought the ordinance move forward, and then Councilman Duncan and myself co-sponsored, I can tell you myself, I wasn't looking at, maybe we should wait until the consultant, that whole group thing is done. Because the priority of setting policy is here, and we've already heard from multiple business owners, and we're hearing more and more from business owners. Now, if that would come down to where it would take that long, then that's one thing. But to say, I don't think the January date's going to work, let's just wait until everything's done and let's all group it together, I personally would not support that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. When we pass this, and this ordinance is on the books now, I know there's several districts that it impacts way more than mine, both in the positive as what it's trying to accomplish, and both as we've worked through this, some of the unintended consequences that we're facing. And as I get the feedback from those districts, they seem to be very much more in line with, hey, give us this 90 days to work through this. So for that reason, in support of them, who are much more in the thick of it to some degree than on my side, I'm not going to tell you not to do this. I'm going to just express my two final concerns, which is by not taking some kind of positive action, I do worry that we're opening ourselves up to selective enforcement issues if that comes up. I think that's a real concern, and I do think we need to be aware of that. And the second thing is, I still am not sure this, if we put it on hold, directly addresses our original concerns as it relates to the trails and sidewalks, but I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. So just want to get that on the record. Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councilman Emerson and Councilwoman Valdivia, and I'd like to chime in and get a chance later too.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think a lot of us, maybe most of us, have met with staff, and I echo what not Christina, sorry, but Councilwoman Valdivia and Councilwoman Hiller said that yeah, staff has done a fantastic job under a short time frame to get all this put together and try to give us the options and the impact. So I really appreciate that. I fully support this phase implementation to let staff as well as enforcement do something that makes sense instead of something that is draconian right from the get-go. So thank you.
Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one more thing about the maps. I mean, you know, I think the whole thing about the selection of up to 6 locations that were being put into districts that are still considered to some extent LMI districts is very problematic. So that was another reason why it's like we need to rethink this whole thing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Deputy Mayor Dobler, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly, I would support putting this off till some January date. I guess I'd heard earlier 1st of January, but end of January is fine as long as it's 2024. I am not going to support some muddle, let's put this off till, 15 other studies are done. I mean, we started this because people are upset. We're not doing anything to directly address what people are upset about. Let's get a date certain, and hopefully that gives us time to address issues. We're not going to make this perfect. I think we said that to start with, but let's make it as good as we can, and then let's get this thing rolling. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the other considerations I had, which after the meeting today and behind my remarks is that I realized that by us stepping up, which was a wonderful thing to do, because of the Ninth Circuit court decision that talked about responsibilities of local governments if they were going to make rules, and because of the caring here, we've ended up focusing on the city doing this and the city doing that. What I realized is that for the most part, up until recently, our homeless services network has been largely nonprofit and private sector, including lots of volunteers and lots of private dollars as well. And when I talked to staff about whether we could, as we were talking about a space to go, whether privately owned property could be considered, people really hadn't been talking about that very much. If we're going to leave it the way it is, I hope that we make it really clear to the homeless innovation folks and to the partners that we're not wanting to take over and own this whole circumstance, but instead are eager to have folks step up and offer solutions about spaces and places or how to manage camping. Does that make sense? You know, this discussion so far has centered on publicly owned land and, in our case, city-owned land, but there's a lot of property in this town and a lot of people who want to be part of a solution. And so by our kind of owning it right now, as long as we can communicate clearly that we're eager to see those partners step up, then we can be a good partner or a good supporter. We don't have to be it. Does that make sense? Thank you.
If I may, unless there's someone else who would like to speak again to the subject. For my part, I think the governing body took an action because they listened to their constituents. They wanted something put in place, and I hate to say something, they wanted specific actions to take place, and we've tried to do that through the new ordinance that we adopted. For me, I've struggled with the wording that we use when we're talking about either in support or in opposition to this. I keep hearing delay and put on hold. It is not my intention to delay or put anything on hold. I do think it is important for us to understand that the ordinance is passed, it will go into effect, it will be used as necessary, and it will be used in a way that's humane and considerate of each situation. I agree with Spencer, Councilman Duncan, when he speaks to, we still have to be able to have the tools in place that if necessary, we're able to take an action. It's just like running a red light. That rule is out there. It doesn't get enforced every day, unfortunately. But when it's necessary, it will get enforced. And it's enforced to prevent something worse happening. And that's what we need to keep in mind as we're moving forward incrementally. We're not wholesale picking up people and shaking them up and just saying you're on your own. We're not doing that. We're doing everything we can for those people who are willing, as it has been pointed out, to be helped. And we need to help them as much as possible and not get caught up in the idea that we'll be able to affect every last person out there. Those people that we can help, we will help. And that's what this ordinance does. It gives notice. If you want help, we're here for you. If you don't, we're moving to the next person who does. So I don't like us get caught up, for us to get up and caught up in the idea that delaying is going to put everything on hold and we're going to be just walking in mud again, doing the same thing we've been doing. So for me, my support is with you, City Manager, but my concern is that our message is clear. We're not delaying. We're implementing the ordinance that we saw the need to implement, to put in place.
Yes.
And we're going to do it with consideration and compassion. I'm confident that the police department can tell one thing from the other when they're out there in the field and they see the necessity to have the tools to help other citizens who are impacted by this whole problem. So those are my thoughts. Is there any further discussion or questions for the city manager on this presentation? Okay, thank you, City Manager. We'll move on now to agenda item number 5, the consent agenda. Madam Clerk?
A is approval of an information technology consultant and specialized technical support contract between the City of Topeka and Revise LLC in an amount not to exceed $139,100 for consulting services. B are minutes of the regular meeting of October 17, 2023, and there are no applications.
Okay, you've heard the consent agenda is read. Is there a motion to consider?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilman Kell. Is there a second? Second from Councilwoman Hiller. Take the roll call, please.
Okay. Councilmembers Duncan?
Yes.
Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila?
Yes.
Ortiz?
Yes.
Emerson?
Yes.
Kale?
Yes.
Nager? And Dobler.
Yes.
All right, we have 7 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, motion's been carried. We'll move on to agenda item number 7, non-action items. Madam Clerk?
A is an update on the Hotel Topeka at Center City.
Mr. City Manager?
It's on the hotel, right? So, as you know, Mayor and governing body, we had a Topeka Development Corporation before this meeting that centered on the Hotel Topeka operation. You had that report, you went through it, you took action, and I would suggest to you that we don't have to run through that twice. The public can look at, we have that on video like we do every governing body meeting, but this was where you were directors at the Topeka Development Corporation, and I would just suggest to you that we go ahead and move on.
Well, City Manager, I'd support that. I mean, we've done it once. We don't need to do it twice in the same night. Let's move on then to non-action item B. City Manager.
So this is actually Councilman Spencer's item, I believe. This B with private security guard uniforms ordinance, and C, a vacant property registration ordinance. I will give you a little bit of background before Councilman Spencer addresses this, but on the ordinance, if you took this action, it would allow our officers that are employed by state agencies or security agencies stationed at a state agency to wear their own Topeka Police Department uniforms. Councilman Spencer.
Thank you, City Manager. This was taken up by the Policy and Finance Committee. It passed 3-0. It really is kind of as simple as it sounds. If they're working on behalf of a state agency or for a security company contracted by a state agency, they would be allowed to wear their uniforms. There was an issue and actually some jobs lost. There may be an opportunity if we pass this to get those back where we were doing this work. State wanted them to wear their uniforms. We had policy that said they couldn't. Police said, whoops. This is an effort to correct that. Again, it only applies to state buildings and agencies. It doesn't apply to the world as a whole. We may have a conversation someday about that. We'll see. That is not on the table today. This is just to help maybe get some of that work back for off-duty officers who can pick up some additional shifts by doing some work on behalf of the state. So that's the purpose of it, and I guess that's all there is to it. Thank you, Mayor.
Question, Councilman Kell?
So how long was that on the books for? Because I'd worked for state agencies and there was TPD in uniform.
You are correct.
Yeah. So was it just a whoops that no one realized it was on the book?
You are correct.
Okay,
Now the sheriff's office is doing some of that work. There may be an issue there, but I won't go into that tonight. But the police department now would like at least be back in the fight if possible.
Yeah,
at some
exactly.
point. So,
I
yeah.
get that, yes.
Yeah. And this doesn't both the city manager and our police chief also get to approve any off-duty police work, period. So even if this came back into effect, they would have to make sure it's with the right agency or it's what they want them to do and give that approval. That applies to any off-duty work right now, so that still applies here.
So with this policy, or the policy that was on the books already, does this prohibit them from when, let's say, they're working at the movie theater, which I've seen plenty of officers in uniform at the theater? Would this prevent them from wearing their uniform? Because
this has nothing to do with that issue. That is an ongoing discussion the city attorney and I are having about what that should or shouldn't look like moving forward.
I've had an issue with that for years because it becomes a situation of who's responsible for them at that time, because I ran into situations where being at Kauffman Stadium, Kauffman's, oh no, they're KCPD. KCPD says, no, they're loaned out to Kauffman. And it's just back around and around. And it's like, it's my thing is, is if you're out doing, I agree with the state agency things. They're always looking for well-qualified security aspects. So I agree with that. But when you're getting into private businesses and things like that, that's where my issue comes into play. So
well, now you sound like the city attorney, but we'll keep having that conversation. But I want to be clear, that is not what's on the table. This has nothing to do with that. This is only the state agencies.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Move on to non-action item C. City manager.
All right, Mayor, governing body, this again is Councilman. Well, Mayor and governing body, this again is a discussion item, not an action item at this point. Councilman Spencer will lead the discussion on vacant property registration.
Thank you, City Manager. Again, this went through Policy and Finance Committee and was approved. And when I screw some of this up, the city manager or city attorney will correct me on a couple of these. This is trying to do a couple things. The first is it's cleaning up some banking, mortgage, and financial institution language. We had an issue actually at the state legislature where there was a bill that has not gone through yet, but to not allow cities at all to have vacant registries. One of the three parties who pushed that was the Bankers Association, and their primary concern was there's a period of time where they are not even allowed to do anything with the property because it's stuck in that process, yet we were requiring them to register and pay these fees. They simply said, that ain't fair. Why should I have to pay these fees when even though it's in process, I can't go actually do anything with the property. Recognizing that was an issue both at the state level and not an unreasonable request in general, we thought we would correct that here in Topeka. And I think you'll see a lot of other cities who have this do that to make that period, well, we're going to change the whole fees in general, but get them off of that during that period and not penalize them if they don't register it until they can actually take physical possession of that property. The second thing this does is currently you have to register your vacant property and pay a fee. We're eliminating the fee, but we're keeping in place the requirement that you have to register the property. And the third part of this is, as long as you register your property, you're fine. If you don't, we're going to fine you on the back end. So there will be a penalty for not registering as opposed to a fee for having to register. And I believe those are the three primary things this thing does. Wow, I may have got it right. We're hoping to, by making that change, it'll encourage more people to register because we think a lot of folks don't simply because they don't want to pay the fee. So having a penalty we think is a little better way to get people to actually engage in that process and know that they need to register their property. So that is what this is attempting to do.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilman Duncan? Councilman Hiller? Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. And I've talked to Councilman Spencer a couple times about this, but overall, if I'm, what we had was kind of a two-track ordinance as it stands. One track was properties on which there were mortgages that were in foreclosure that were being neglected because there was a track to work through the lending institutions to get those fees and to deal with them. But the other track was the properties that are just owned outright, a whole variety of properties all over the city. And one of the reasons you're proposing this, as I understand it, is because the company that was handling the foreclosed properties has gone out of business, and so we're just not doing that anymore.
I think there were issues with the company. However, more broadly, you know, sometimes people make mistakes, and in 2019, the company worked with a department that no longer exists and really sold the city that we could do that. Kansas is a lien state law, however, and so courts do not recognize a right of preservation for mortgagees. So we imposed requirements on the banks to go in, secure the property post notice. That's trespassing if a bank does that. A bank can go to jail and get misdemeanors and all kinds of things if they do that. That's very real in Kansas. We don't recognize the right of preservation, but we passed this in 2019. Banks were a bit busy during the pandemic with everything else. 2021 comes around and they're trying to figure out how to enforce this. And luckily we have great community partners in our community that would rather come to the city and help us work through this. And so a significant amount of time was spent looking at how can we accomplish this. I think our partner banks, who are wonderful to work with, are happy to take care of their property the second they can when they take title ownership of it, but they can't do that before without breaking Kansas law. And so this cleans up that portion to make it so that our banks can comply, but it does eliminate that foreclosure period because in Kansas, we're not legally allowed to do that.
Okay. And the other half of the experience with that company was that it turned out that even though we were assured that there would be no staff time needed, no expense to the city to get all the other properties registered, that turned out not to be true at all. And so steadily our code compliance people were having to be engaged, we're having to take the appeals and all that kind of stuff. At this point, just an FYI, I guess, in the Public Health and Safety Committee and the Changing Our Culture of Property Maintenance Initiative, Property Maintenance Unit and the Fire Department is taking the lead to partner with Fire, and through that with the Police Department and the Water Department, understanding that we already basically have 4 lists of properties that we can check status on. And so they're working to see if we can't simply come up with a list that doesn't even require that affirmative registration, and that's more useful if our idea is to know who the owners are of property and to know what the status is in case there was a fire or someone claimed there were trespassers and so on. So we may not need any of this once we get the other stuff, the research that the staff is doing straightened out. So, you know, when the company went out of business, there was a question about whether we should just get rid of this altogether. And I guess the idea is to keep it for a while and at least clean out the stuff that we know isn't going to work and get rid of the fees. But I think we need to keep our eye on it.
Okay. Move on to the next discussion item. 7D, City Manager.
You ready? All right, the next discussion item is the 2024 legislative agenda, and Councilman Member Duncan of the Policy and Finance Committee Chair, who is the chair, and Amanda Stanley, the city attorney, will lead you through this discussion.
Thank you, City Manager. Don't worry, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. Also, Whitney Dameron, our lobbyist, was not able to be here this evening. He will, I believe, be here next week, so you can ask him questions because this is a non-action item. But he'll make sure he's here to answer any questions before any action's taken that you may have. So he apologized for that. I'm just going to highlight what I call the changes, as it were. You have the resolution in front of you. We can continue to include home rule. Under the finance and taxation, all of those were in our legislative agenda last year with one small exception. We added a sentence that talks about the LAVTR, which is the Local Ad Valorem Reduction Fund. There will be a push at the legislature to fund that for the first time in 21 years. Its goal is to take state tax money, put it into that fund. It goes to the counties and the cities to help reduce property taxes. So we're going to support that effort being pushed by counties and some cities. Under the public welfare piece, we had abandoned housing and mental health in there last year. We did add to mental health an addition that says we support the creation of a state mental health facility to provide additional bed space for patients with mental health issues. That, again, is something being discussed. You know, what's old is new again. After they closed hospitals 20 years ago, they're realizing maybe not the right thing to do and that they need to do something about it. So we want to be in that because we know that that's an important issue for our community. We did add this year Medicaid expansion. There were 3 members of the committee, and we all maybe have different, various reasons why we wanted to include that. One of the things that we did discuss, particularly important at the city of Topeka, as we talked about tonight, is our homelessness issue. And there's a real mental health and addiction gap when it comes to getting people long-term treatment, because as you heard Vallejo say, they're all uninsured. Some kind of expansion of that program would absolutely help us in that alone, let alone any other benefits that come from Medicaid expansion. So that's why we decided to add that. We have a portion on homelessness in here that the state needs to help us address the problem. We also support passage of, have put in here the last edition minimum wage. We support passage of 2023 SB 140, which would allow cities to utilize their home rule power to require employees to pay wages higher than the minimum wage. This wouldn't be us asking the state to take any action. It's just asking them to protect home rule and let that decision be made at the local level so that governing bodies can have that discussion with their own business community and their own citizens. And then 2 things that were also in there last year we did not make any change to were we continue to support efforts to secure funding for Menninger property, as that's still under work, and we continue to want the state to assist us with expanding broadband across the city. So that's it. It's not too long. We tried to keep it short and sweet and to the things we think matter most here in the city. So if there are questions today or in the next week about any of those, please toss them out and we'll do the best we can to answer them.
I have a question about one of the items, but we can do that offline.
Either way.
Yeah, just in wait. Okay. Any questions for Councilwoman?
Just a comment. Thanks for the work on this committee. A number of us sitting around this table and online were at the Medicaid expansion hearing last week that the governor held. And just to expand on that point a minute, the governor's figures were that the state of Kansas is losing $66 million a month because we are not taking advantage of bringing our own tax dollars back to this state to help people that are typically LMI who are suffering medical and mental health and substance abuse issues. You know, it's interesting so one of the things they talked about was that that's not only to help people's health, but it creates jobs or better paying jobs so that we can keep the people that are providing the services. Like we heard a little earlier today, there's apparently a talent drain across the border to the states that have Medicaid, and we need them fully staffed and to provide those services. So it's an economic boost to our social service budgets as well as the community to have those dollars coming back. I thought that was an incredibly big number, and appreciate you bringing it up and including it. Thank you.
I think for us on Medicaid expansion, and this is what I tell legislators, it's the only tool that's up there in their toolbox to help with this problem. So it's the one we're going to support, right? If there are people with alternatives that get the job done, I'm sure we'll get behind those, right? It's whatever gets us there. But to date, no alternatives have been offered at the state level. But we'd be glad to hear those also. But we're going to at least support the one tool that's up there and say, help us out here in our cities with those problems. So that was kind of our discussion at the committee level.
Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. I think just concurring with everybody and having been at the governor's roundtable, but who ultimately pays for this? Not only the ones that are suffering, but I don't know if we've ever had anyone that can do studies for us to know in Topeka how much taxpayers end up paying out by not having Medicaid expansion. So taxpayers pay for this, taxpayers, across party lines, across incomes. Everybody is paying for this. Everyone is paying for this. And what happens is it makes the crisis that we experience in municipal governments just grow and grow and grow as we try to do more with less and less and less. So it is the taxpayer that pays for no Medicaid expansion. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, we'll move on to 7E, City Manager.
So, we're gonna have a discussion about City of Topeka parking. Jason is going to give you a presentation on this, just to kind of bring us back together, he and Braxton will. You've had this on your agenda for over a year, so we thought it was a good time to review it. Sorry, repeat all that, so. I thought it would be helpful to go back. You've had this on your books for a year about parking and to review the downtown parking situation and to ask Jason and Braxton to give you a report on that, kind of an update of where you were at now versus a year ago.
Before we get started, I just want to check with the governing body to see, typically sometimes around this time, at 8 o'clock, we take a 5-10 minute break, especially in anticipation of a long discussion. So I'm just offering that. Is the governing body willing to continue, or do you want to take a break?
I'd be willing to take a break, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. If you'll allow us to take a 10-minute break, we will go into a 10-minute recess right now before we hear the proposal.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we'll come back from recess and we'll resume the agenda item E, which is a discussion on City of Topeka parking. Braxton?
Thank you for the opportunity. Second in our series of ordinances that the council has adopted that have not been implemented is the parking ordinance. Just to get everyone back up to speed, last October, the City Council unanimously passed a parking ordinance. Shortly after it was passed, we were directed to not implement all the parts of it. And so we're here to seek your direction on where you want us to go. Just to go back to the final recommendations that were made that led to the adoption of the ordinance is we recommend maintaining the ownership and management of all of the parking assets. We had looked at as requested by the governing body, we had looked at many different options, including selling off the garages, contracting with a third party to manage the garages, and the ultimate decision was made to maintain the ownership because that was more efficient. The decision was made to establish paid parking on Kansas Avenue and the 100 blocks east and west of Kansas Avenue to increase the parking rates and the fees charged in the citations that have not been changed since 2010, and then to provide for a rate schedule for administration to give flexibility to allow for demand-based parking and make inflationary-based rate increases. The general fund was identified to support the initial capital repairs. The same night the ordinance was passed, the council passed a resolution authorizing $22 million of improvements for those parking garages. And then the ongoing maintenance of the garages would be paid for through the rates generated by the parking system. So again, as mentioned, minimum and maximum rates were established. I'm not going to go through all of these, but parking lots basically $15 minimum to an $80 maximum, and fines, first offense, $8 minimum and a $20 maximum. We have this is very frustrating. We have moved forward on the selection of the design build contractor. It's like I'm going through puberty again with my voice fluctuating. We selected an outstanding team that has expertise nationwide in terms of maintaining concrete structures, has that expertise in terms of being able to analyze the damage of the corrosion, and they have started doing work on Uptown or 9th Street and town site. Town site improvements began May of '23. Uptowner started October 1st. And then the on-street hood prices and the citations were increased effective as of January 1st. The other price changes have not been implemented to date. The additional developments since the passage of the ordinance, 2 of our largest tenants have reduced the amount of spaces. Townsite Plaza, reduction of 226 spaces, so that's at $8,000 month reduction. And then Evergy, of course, with their moving out of Topeka and going back to Kansas City, we've lost 296 spaces there, so that's $13,000. So we're looking at $20,000 reduction in revenue. Just in terms of where we are right now, our projected revenue for 2023 is at $2.3 million through July 31st. You can see where we're tracking versus 2022. We're just about $100,000 less in terms of revenue through the first 9 months of the year. I'm sorry, the first 7 months of the year. We have working with our consultant on the garage repairs. Next slide. I come up with a cost estimate. These are estimates. These are subject to change. What will not change is that $22 million figure at the bottom until and unless we come back to the governing body and seek an amendment to that CIP resolution. But this is where we are right now in terms of coming up with the costs for doing the repairs at the garages, and this includes obviously structural and waterproofing, as well as some mechanical, plumbing, electrical, fire protection. And so the original concept was to implement a 10% price increase initially, and then as we're making garage improvements, go ahead and implement the increases in the garages at the time that the improvements are made. And then to have a 3% inflationary increases beginning in 2026, and that basically accounts for approximately 10% increase over each of the subsequent 3 years, so that we don't get it back into the position that we were in, where we have $22 million of deferred maintenance. And then the implementation of paid parking started out at $1.25 per hour on Kansas Avenue, and then go to $1 an hour on the 100 blocks east and west of the avenue, which results in, on the next slide, estimated revenue on the avenue of $250,000 annually, as well as $100,000 annually from the 100 blocks. Implementation of Kansas Avenue, we have established a 3-month timeline that would allow us to order the pay stations and the kiosks, because we're not going to do that through metered parking. We'd simply do it as block zone parking, and then have kiosks for those people that don't have the ability to use an application to make the payment. So that would take us 3 months to get the pay stations implemented, as well as to do a public notification and awareness campaign. And then our future plans are to move from mechanical meters to pay stations and application-based parking, as it's much more efficient. Mechanical meters are just that, they're mechanical. So it's only a question of when they're going to fail, not whether they're going to fail. And we're already seeing a fairly high rate in terms of what we've had to deal with in terms of vandalism and mechanical failure of meters. Next page would show the proposed locations for the pay stations along the avenue. And then in terms of the overarching strategy on the next page, talking about increasing the amount of 10-hour parking outside of the high demand areas. And this would be to help benefit the employees that are working in restaurant and retail that don't have the financial ability to pay for $1 an hour to park on the avenue. And then eliminate 1-hour time limits to go to more efficient 2-hour time limits for enforcement for our few staff that we have, parking control officers. And then where appropriate, convert from 2 to 4-hour parking. And then, as mentioned before, to migrate to application-based time zone payment as opposed to maintaining meters. Next page basically just shows, again, where we are now in terms of the current garage parking rate. It's $67.75, taking that up to $74. Reserve parking, the 9th Street lot, which of course is the BNSF lot, that because of the agreement between the city and BNSF, the parking rate in that garage has to be 30% less than the other lots that the city owns, and then our surface lots. And then last page, long-term projection is to treat this as a business and to have parking pay for itself and establish a capital fund to be able to pay for future improvements to the garages, with the understanding that that initial 22 million tranche was to get us over the hump in terms of getting these garages all fully functioning. And with that, we will gladly stand for any questions that you have and very much seek your guidance in terms of where you want us to go.
Okay, thank you, Rex. Councilman Kell.
On those safety concerns you listed that has already been ongoing in the Uptowner and the, those 2 lots that you're currently working on, was that the structural safety concerns, or was that actually some of the concerns that were brought up by the council concerning like lights and things like that that are going on right now?
A combination of all the above. Uptowner has absolute significant structural issues that need to be addressed. The structure is not currently open to parking because we are basically shoring it up and having our contractor in there. Those need to be addressed. Town site, I was just in there with Jason last week and the city manager, and they are redoing the lights down at the bottom level, going with the LED lights that will have much greater lifespan, as well as they're motion activated. So far better. So mixture of everything, council member.
All right, thank you.
Further questions for Braxton? This is an opportunity. I think Braxton made it quite clear he'd like to have some direction of where we're going with this. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, as probably most of you know, this came in front of our committee. And at that committee level, we heard some testimony that some downtown businesses were ready for this to be implemented. But I don't think it's any secret that we all got some emails from some people who own a lot of businesses downtown. And their concern is, at least the way I interpreted it, was that, hey, we know this has to be done initially. And I think this was the Kansas Avenue parking. They were mainly talking about paid parking on Kansas Avenue. They know that has to happen at some point, but they think right now we're just on the cusp of some businesses either thriving or failing, and they ask that it be, at least that parking be, continue to be free for the next couple of years, as if I recall the email. I think we all got emails on that.
City manager and I have a meeting set up with Mr. Foster in early December. That was the earliest he was available for us to have the discussion with him to see what in his mind and the businesses that he's representing is a fair timeline. Because if it is, yes, we understand that this needs to be done because we have to generate the revenue to pay for $22 million worth of repairs. And it's a timeline where they say a year or two, and then we can go ahead and implement it, and you have our full support for doing that, then to me, that's something that we can absolutely work with, right? We need to work with those partners. I mean, because this parking is for their customers, right?
Right, correct.
You know, and then my thought would be if we can achieve something that they're willing to support and champion for us, and whether it's a year, 18 months, 2 years, whatever that looks like, and then make sure that they don't have any opposition to implementing the increases in the parking garages. And in my mind, in fairness, it would be upon completion of the improvements to the garages, you would go ahead and raise the rate in those garages as long as they're supportive of that. To me, that's a path forward.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. Braxton, in fact, the $22 million is not being paid for out of the parking fund. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. That's being paid for out of general obligation funds.
So to equate raising parking fees to paying for the $22 million is not totally accurate, is it?
No, sir, and if I said that, I apologize. I would have misspoken. It is to generate revenue to pay for and to establish a capital fund for future parking garage repairs, sir.
All right, that's exactly what I thought you meant, Braxton, so thanks for that. I, in fact, will, I guess at this point, probably waiting till you and the city manager get a chance to meet with the, let's just say, concerned downtown business owners. I'll wait on this, but at some point I'm prepared to introduce an amendment to the existing ordinance that delays the implementation of both Kansas Avenue and the 100 blocks on either side until probably something like 2025. We can debate, I guess, about the exact date. One thing a piece of information I would like to have, I know what the pro forma shows as far as the revenue generated from Kansas Avenue and the 100 blocks. I would like to know what our losses are going to be projected as if we don't do Kansas Avenue and the 100 blocks. I'm not sure that made sense, but I think the revenue is actually going to be higher than what the original losses were projected. And if we can get that number, I would also be prepared, at least for the next 2 years, to identify a line item in the general fund budget, and possibly this is just end of the year reserves to make up that loss. So that's kind of where I'm headed, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jason has looked at that number, sir.
So currently on-street parking operates at a loss of roughly $50,000 per year. So the cost of enforcing and maintaining the on-street assets is short of the revenue generated on-street by about $50,000 per year.
Okay, so it'd be fair to say if we delayed implementation for 2 years and filled that void out of the general fund, we'd be looking at $100,000 for that 2-year period.
Based on current revenue, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I've spoken up about this before. City manager wouldn't really tell me what you were going to talk about tonight, so I didn't bring my notes. But I just hope that if people want to make these decisions and not get this system going, that maybe we can go through the opportunity for full understanding of how this parking system is supposed to work. I represent downtown. I've been through every one of these meetings and the process with the consultant and so on. And one of the things that concerns me, the small businesses are ready. They've expected it. The issue for us to grow is that our capacity for accommodating more customers for the restaurants and the businesses and having Kansas Avenue full is in the garages. It's not on the street. I feel like it's our responsibility as a city to be proactive in understanding the dynamic of having a system in order so that people are inspired to go to the right place so that we have enough parking to accommodate all the vehicles. And that parking is in the garages. We already know on the blocks that are full of businesses that people drive around the block twice and then park a block or two away, or maybe go to the garage. As we grow, those spaces on the street will not be available. And even though it's tempting to leave it that way, if in fact we need to be moving the system so that we really can accommodate the growth that we want to attract. I've had to sit with some downtown advocates, realtors, who have run off businesses from downtown because they want everybody to be able to park on the street and next to the building. That's not how it works in a downtown. I'm worried that as we grow, what we learned along the way with the consultants and with Jason's predecessor, who helped work with the small businesses who were not invited to the table for a long time, was that, and this made sense to me. I was not a scholar in it, but I'm pretty well educated now. People choose where to park based on price. And so being able to not only have a cheaper rate if we set it up that way, a cheaper rate in the garage than on the street. Kansas Avenue, the pricing in every model we've seen has Kansas Avenue at a little higher price than the side streets. And the idea then is that people will, because we want turnover on that main street, if it's a little pricier and it's a 2-hour limit, hopefully that will inspire enough people to park in the garage or a couple of blocks away and hike in because they got a cheaper deal on their parking, so that we would have set up our parking system to naturally then, sort of organically, if you will, balance itself with the demand that we have for our businesses, so that we can get people in and out of the short-term visits. But if somebody, which is what we want, if somebody wants to come and not only have lunch but go shopping, if we have a 2-hour limit downtown, they're going to get a ticket. Do we want to encourage them to be in the garage at a cheaper rate and never get a ticket versus being on the avenue and us just paying people to ride around and give expense? We've raised the price of the tickets, but we haven't made the parking system work, is how we're moving along right now. And I just would really encourage, I've encouraged city manager and Braxton, when they finally get the meeting, to challenge our one complainer about what that magic time really is, and city manager made reference to that. But one of the things that I did after our last meeting on this was to sit down with Jason and challenge what the dollars would look like if we had the first 2 hours free in the garage. Again, with people following pricing and us needing to re-educate folks who are used to parking at the door about our big city downtown. Could that work? The numbers that you saw for the on-street parking are a little lower than what our first-year rates were supposed to be when the plan first came through. If we have the rates just a little bit higher on Kansas Avenue and on the side streets, the system would support first 2 hours free at the garages. So just want to throw that out to all of you as something to think about. And again, what that magic time is to me is, when do we change the system so that everybody, these businesses, whether they're restaurants or small retailers or offices, so that they know what our system's going to be. They know what they're buying into. If they decide to lease or purchase a building downtown, they know what our system's going to be because it's already shifted and it's on the road. I don't want us looking at a short-term decision, let's call it, that's really getting in our own way of setting the tone for being a big city downtown. The other thing we have right now is when you drive around, you see the meters, you see the bags, you go, oh, these folks are still a work in progress. They haven't really settled on things. Getting those pay boxes in, getting the system in place says, we got it, we're there. I just want to share those observations and those pieces from our parking study, which was adopted and supported by DTI at this point 3 or 4 years ago as where to go. I want us to make the best decision. We also have always had that parking as an enterprise fund. It's paid for itself. And so when Braxton spoke about needing the revenue on the avenue, we've got a lot of things we need to do. And a lot of people want to make sure we're fixing potholes and paying our police officers well. So we've got to, if we don't set up that system so it will pay for itself, A, we're not going to look finished, and B, we've got to come up with the money from somewhere. Thank you.
Further discussion? Thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Josh. Okay, that's the last of our non-action items. We'll move on to public comment. I have one person signed up for public comment. Chris Blythe, if you'll step forward, sir.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Mr. Blythe, have you testified before us before?
I testified, no. I'm new
Okay.
transplant to Topeka.
I just want to give you a little information. When you start, a green light will go on. You continue to speak, a yellow light will go on that says you have 1 more minute out of the 4 minutes that you're allotted. When a red light comes on, then your 4 minutes are completed. Okay?
Okay, am I allowed to ask a question while I address?
You can ask questions rhetorically, but there's no response. This is not a back and forth discussion. You're making your comments based on what you want to talk about.
Okay.
Okay? Proceed when you're ready.
Okay. Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The piece I heard, my quick comment is the piece I heard about the revision to the ordinance for the vacant properties, I feel like is a great move in the right direction. So kudos for that. I don't really know too much about that, but I've been in contact with a few of you about, that matter particularly. So to hear that something's being done and things are in the works is a very good thing to hear. But yeah, so the reason why I wanted to speak is because I believe that the issue at Mount Auburn Cemetery is something that should be addressed by the city as a whole. I've spoken with individuals in different departments about different aspects of it, but I think that Mount Auburn Cemetery houses a lot of valuable members of the community more recently, but also through antiquity that have helped build up this town, build up this city, and I believe that is something that the city as a whole should look into. I did not know after reading, I did an interview with Channel 27, and I did not know that it's potentially on the list for through the Kansas Historic Society to be preserved. And that, again, kudos. I don't know how many, if not all of you were involved in it, but that is, I don't know if I could ask for better than that. But on the way to that decision, if that is the ultimate decision, I ask just that, and I think I'm preaching to the choir where it's being discussed, it's being concerned, it's been brought up. I personally have a personal investment. My family members, a lot of them are buried there. My mother, who is still alive, who also has a plot there next to her father and mother. Hopefully, knock on wood, everything goes well and she can continue to have that plot. So yeah, that was why I wanted to come and discuss. And after my interview, I learned that you guys are kind of already in the works. So if that does not bring enough attention to it, I hope that I can continue to bring attention to it as I try to get some answers. I've got a missing headstone from my great-grandfather that I'm trying to get some answers about. So you might hear from me soon, some of you. You might have heard my name already. I hope it's in a good capacity. And I'm just trying to get some answers, get closure, and help my family continue to be valued members of this community and our legacy to remain strong and beautiful and contribution. So yes, thank you very much, guys. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Okay. That's the only person we had signed up. We'll move to announcements. Madam Clerk.
Okay, for the 21st agenda, we have 2 board appointments. On the consent agenda, we have 2 expenditure ordinances. Action items include an ordinance for the private security guard uniforms, an ordinance concerning vacant property registration. We will authorize a public hearing date for the 2023 budget hearings that will be held on December 12th. We have an ordinance for Clay Sherwood Rentals LLC vacation request located at 410 Southwest 6th Avenue and 523 Southwest Harrison Street. And then we have a resolution adopting the 2024 legislative agenda. Non-action items include the 2024 Topeka Dreams 3 awardees, and then another discussion on the 2021 International Residential Code.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
I have nothing, Mayor and Governing Body.
Okay. Move to council members. We'll start with you, Councilman Kell.
Just for clarification, a few people asked, we are going to have a meeting on the 28th, correct, to replace the one from last week? Nope, okay. We did that during the primary, so I had that brought up to me. Okay, so wanted to say happy birthday to the Marines. They celebrated their birthday last Friday. Veterans Day Parade was fun to be a part of again this last year. I was right behind Mars, though, so I think they kind of stole my thunder a little bit. Congrats to councilpersons Valdivia and Duncan for being reelected, and congratulations to councilperson electees Banks and Miller for their wins. I believe they'll be both good additions to the council. Finally, it's getting that time of year where it's going to be cold out. If you have extra coats, gloves, hats, look to donate those. If you're not using them, it's one of those things, if you haven't used it in so long, look at it as a possible donation. There's plenty of organizations out there looking for those type of things, and there's plenty of people out there that don't have the access to buy those outright from the store. So please look at any cold weather gear, blankets, things like that to help out the community. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Dogler. Oh, okay. I did not know. Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few things real quick. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit, but I'll be quick on our alcohol and drug grant requests. As I did sit here and did some math, it's obviously the process had some issues this year. It happens. The good news is it sounds like staff is working to address those problems. So kudos to them and Carrie for getting on top of that and working through what sounds like an issue. You know, we're a $400 million general fund. We're a multi-billion-dollar budget across all our departments once you add it up. If you look at the one group who stood before us today, PARS, if you take their request here this evening to just fund them from last year, you're talking around $17,000. If you fund their full request on their one line item for prevention programs, we're talking $28,000. I think based on the feedback here, we all think that's a really good program that's quite effective. Feels to me like we can fill that gap this year, fix the issues with that little committee and move on. So there's the numbers for you. Maybe we can make that happen in the next couple of weeks, if at all possible. Today was the first meeting of the Land Bank Board. Went well. It was kind of just an introductory meeting with the members to kind of figure out what the heck we've gotten ourselves into, have a plan of action for the next several months. We will meet again in December and January for sure, and then we'll kind of come up with a more regular schedule after that. We'll make sure those meetings are public or published so people know in advance, and we are going to add a Zoom component for anyone who wants to participate via Zoom and provide comment or listen in. But it was a good meeting, so I'm glad that that's actually moving forward and happening. So I had yesterday my first colonoscopy because apparently, because apparently 45 is the new 50 is what they say. I'm 47. They used to be you don't get the first one till you're 50. You now get it at 45. And the reason I bring it up is to A, let people know that 45 is the new 50. So if you were trying to wait till you're 50, too bad. If you're in that 45, go get it. They found a couple little things and they took them out and they got to go back in a couple of years. So it's preventative and it's doing its purpose. So there's my public service announcement. If you're in that age range and haven't done it, just do it. Get it over with.
That was intrusive to my mind.
That's all right. And the last thing is, I always tried to make sure that I don't discuss campaign stuff up here. I try to keep it separate out in that world versus the business we're doing. But I will say thank you to the voters for reelecting me. I appreciate the opportunity and their faith and trust in me for another 4 years to see what work we can get done and keep this seat that I get to sit in every Tuesday. So thank you very much, Mayor.
I don't know if you're going to top that, Councilwoman Hiller, but you're not. No medical information necessary.
Okay. Now you made me think of something I should bring up. But I won't. Okay. I too want to congratulate the winners in the election a couple of weeks ago. Welcome the returns coming back, and the 2 new members, and also give credit to everyone for a well-run campaign and elections here. I think it really went well, and also express appreciation for those who are going off, one of whom is present right now. So it's a busy time, and we've got our 2 months or 6 weeks of transition, I guess, to bring them on board. My understanding from Liz is that the new council members have already been invited to come to their orientation the last week of this month, so people will be seeing them around City Hall, and they'll be getting brushed up on all the different departments as well as all of our rules and how we do things and so on. So thanks, Liz, for that. Something else in the last couple weeks that I think everybody has noticed is we've had a lot of events going on. And I had 3 in one night last week, I think. I'll mention, too, that I got to the State of the Community was really a tremendous breakfast event, and I thought that the mayor and Commissioner Rippon did a pretty good stand-up duo there, keeping the program going. Also, the 20 under 40 event, which was that same evening at the town site, was pretty stupendous. Huge crowds in both, but the diversity and the involvement and the community involvement of those 20 individuals was pretty impressive, and everybody that was out there, and they're building a set of alumni who are showing up to support those events as well. And I know that I missed the NAAC Freedom Fund banquet that same night, and or the next night, I guess. And so those are 3 examples, but lots going on and really solid stuff for community building, I'd say. Since you brought up the grant money, I want to precaution everybody about bringing our alcohol and drug grant fund back in a couple of weeks. We've run into this with the social service grant before, and have worked on, I think what you're gonna, hopefully they will bring back their whole matrix of how they set up their priorities and what the scoring setup is. I think that they're using pretty much what we use for SSG. And the deal is that every one of the agencies can tell a story. And one of the reasons we set up the system that we have was so that we could let the experts do the scoring based on whatever the system was, and support them. And I think theirs is the same. We'll find out, because I'm not positive. They have had the same crew for years. Theirs is peer reviewed rather than separately, and it sounds like they may be wanting to consider doing a little bit differently. But we do have to understand the system, and it was really good that people asked for that. But we also have to support the work that the system that was set up worked on. I mean, that's one reason why with social service grants, we go through the process, and then if we want to change it because there were glitches, we do that for the future year, but we don't go backward. So just some thoughts on that. Again, thanks everybody, and congrats.
Councilwoman Valdivia-Acala.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Hiller, I just don't know what we would do without you reminding us continuously of what our obligations should be. But thank you for that. I just too want to say thank you for those that voted for me. I apologize to everyone that saw me on TV that night. I don't think I had any makeup on. But I also wanted to say that Curtis Pitts is going to be holding an event at Hillcrest Community Center on Saturday, November 18th, from 6 p.m. until 10:30 p.m., Teen Fun Nights. And I think he's going to be doing those for a number of Saturdays. He is going to be having a press conference on tomorrow, November 15th at 4 p.m. at Hillcrest Community Center, which, you know, people can find out more, I'm sure, on the news tomorrow night. And this is an effort by him and other collaborators to create a safe space for teens to be able to relax, have fun, play sports, have community, etc. Also, just to all those that attended, to the city, to the community members, to the children that attended the East Topeka North SORT grant ribbon cutting, it was just a wonderful event to see the completion of their SORT grant monies all showing about in community there by Scott Magnet School as well. And it was just really a lovely event. Also, and finally, I'd like to wish my mother, Maria, on Thursday, this coming Thursday, is her birthday, and she will be 87 years old. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz, is she still online? Councilwoman Ortiz?
I'm still here. First, I want to say that COVID is alive and well. So everybody pull out your mask again. I didn't get a chance to celebrate the SORT program that we had today. That was in the making for years. So I wanted to thank staff for putting that together, as well as staff that worked on that. Henderson Construction, man, they moved around that school when I got over there and checked it out several times. So I thought it was fitting to invite Scott Magnet School because those are the kids that will benefit from that. So that whole project was neat. After we got Henderson Construction off of California, 5th and California, and got them moving. It just shows you what the NIAs can do when they come together with our HUD funding. I know thousands of dollars were put into that, and if you get a chance, go through there. I hate that I missed that, but I did not want to get anybody sick. I wanted to say don't forget to sign up for the Thanksgiving dinner. They're asking to sign up by Friday. If you need a dinner, you can call and have it delivered. They're working tirelessly, and that was put together by 4 women in East Topeka at 7th and Lime, so nobody dines alone. Pauline Johnson was one of the founding members, and she's gone on, but we want her legacy to continue on. And I tell you, if you even have just a half an hour to go over there and serve, it's so rewarding. It's very rewarding, just to give back in that serving capacity. I also wanted to say that Sister Leola Wakes, also known as Mother Wakes, is a huge pillar in East Topeka at 10th and 10th and Golden, and she was a soldier for the Lord. And we buried her about a week ago. And when I say she was a soldier, she lived right next to Pine Ridge. She prayed for that area. She listened to the gunshots and the crime, but she loved being there and she loved living there. And she will truly be missed, truly, truly, truly be missed. And condolences go out to her and her family. I also want to send condolences out to Mr. Banks that worked for the city of Topeka for 34 years. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to send this information to you. If you knew him, I'm trying to think of his first name. He was always taking pictures, and he worked for the city in the city parking lot. And when I was reading his obituary, because right now I have nothing but time on my hands, it was unique to see that he worked for the city for 34 years, but he only missed one day. He only called in sick one day. And I think that is so, so remarkable. And I'm going to write them a letter, the family a letter. And Mayor, if you want to join me, that would be awesome. Who does that? I would like to see how much they wrote that check out for how much sick time that they owed him when he retired. Because, you know, when I look at our young people now and they don't want to go to work, and I think, you know, that was the days back then, you know, when my grandfather said, you know, if they ask you for 100, you give them 110%. So I just thought that was remarkable with Mr. Banks, and to him and his family, I think that's very, very unique. And everybody knew him from him taking pictures and him working in the parking garage. That's all I have. I appreciate everybody's phone calls and prayers and concerns, but most of all, I'm very grateful for a loaf of bread that was brought to my doorstep by Mrs. Duncan, and it's very good and tasty when I feel like I can taste. So I just wanted to shout Spencer out for thanking him for making that. As soon as he heard that I had COVID, he made me a loaf of bread, and I appreciate that. But we do need to remember to get our boosters. I didn't get mine because my flu shot makes me sick, but as soon as the doctor says I can, I will. And last but not least, congratulations to everybody. I was sitting here at home thinking about that, but I was thinking about the gentleman that's sitting in my seat, that's wearing out my seat. So I would like for the city manager or whoever is in charge of that, when Tony leaves, to please give me a new seat, because he has really wore my seat down. And so I would like to make sure that it's back to par when I come back. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Henderson.
Well, Mayor, I mean, I had several things to say, but that was like an hour ago when you started talking. Now I've forgotten what I was going to say. Sheesh. That was, anyway. Went to my last Central Highland Park meeting last night, and they always do a fantastic job where they do a Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I haven't been good about being there on a regular basis, but I've never missed a Thanksgiving dinner over there. And it's just fantastic. They have the guy, they call him the chef. He's from the rescue mission.
Oh, yeah.
But he also does
Sean.
catering, yes.
He's good.
And it was fantastic. But the people over there, just that whole NIA are just such great people. So I really appreciate everything they did. I also wanted to, somebody who does a lot for us, Mr. Copley, Braxton, really appreciate everything you do. I mean, most people probably know you're our public works director, but in the last 6 months or whenever we did this hotel thing, you've also done the whole hotel thing. So you've lived about 5 years in the last 6 months. So thank you so much for everything you've done. I know there's been a lot of people helping you, but you've been the point man. And there's a saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy man or woman. And that's definitely the case. I wish we had about 5 more of you, Braxton. So thank you for everything you do for us. That's it.
Thank you. I'm not going to offer anything tonight. I just want us to get moving so that you've made the appropriate acknowledgement with Braxton. I saw him this afternoon out there at that ribbon cutting as well. There's need for a executive session if the city attorney would read.
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 45 minutes to discuss employment matters related to one or more employees pursuant to KSA 7543-19B1. The open meeting will resume in the city council chambers. The following staff may be necessary to assist the governing body in its deliberations. Any staff determined helpful by the governing body.
Okay, you heard the need for an executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, motion to go into executive session by Councilman Kell, second by Councilman Emerson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There she is. Gotcha, Sylvia. We will recess into executive session, and I'd like to start discussions as soon as possible. So if you need to make a quick run, 5 minutes. Okay. We've concluded our executive session. No action has been taken. We're in open session now. There's no further business comes before this body. This meeting is adjourned.